Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Asia House. We're pleased that you're sharing this wonderful evening with us. It's hot, eh? I promise you that the aircon is on. So I don't want anyone fainting. It has happened before, so if anyone feels a little bit overwhelmed, just ask a member of the staff and we'll help you out or get you a glass of water, or wine if you prefer so. For those of you I have yet the pleasure to meet, I'm Juan de Lara, Cultural Program Manager at Asia House. It is a true privilege for us to be able to bring you all closer to Azerbaijani art and to an incredible, distinguished panel. Indeed, Azerbaijani art is one of the big untapped secrets in art, and thankfully, through organizations like our partner, Caspia Contemporary, we are able to bring it closer to you. We thank the Azerbaijan Embassy in London, Azerbaijan House, and the British Kazakh Society for their support for this event. Tonight's talk will expand on the region's vulnerable identity under the Soviet regime, its power for revival in the post-Soviet era, and its manifestation in today's Azerbaijani and Central Asian art. The talk will be moderated by Rose Issa. Issa does not need an introduction. A curator, writer, a publisher, she has championed visual art and film from the Middle East for more than 30 years. She has lived in London since the 80s, and since then she has introduced Western audiences to many artists who have since become stars of the international scene. The evening will be comprised of 3 consecutive presentations, followed by a brief panel in between Rose and our speakers. After the talk, Rose will moderate questions from the public. Finally, join us for a drink in our annex room. And remember to visit Caspia's Contemporaries exhibition in our downstairs gallery. I will give you a better sense of what the talk we're discussing is about. With no more delay, I give floor to Rose, who will be responsible of presenting our speakers tonight. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Good one. For those of you who know me, my expertise is mostly on contemporary Iranian and Arab art. However, when Afsana asked me to moderate, I was delighted. The reason is that I had a great curiosity on Central Asian and Central Asian contemporary art. And I remember in 1989, for those of you who remember Zamana Gallery, which was at the Ismaili Center just opposite the V&A, they did the first exhibition on contemporary art from Uzbekistan there, tiny catalog. But it was really very exciting, and I coordinated with them and collaborated on that show. From then onwards, we didn't hear much about really Central Asia and contemporary art. Till I was in Venice during my visit in 2013, I saw two Azerbaijani pavilions in different venues, and with artists who were really inspired by things that I thought were almost Persian looking, whether it's the shadow artworks of this wonderful artist Rashad Alabarov. These are others, so it reminded me very much of things, whether geometrical or the works of, for example, Farid Rasulov, based on carpet, whole installations of whole room and furniture. I think it's himself, for those of you who know him. Or Vesnik Kakazva. Sorry, I have to pronounce Kavkaza, who work with the musical instrument, string instrument. That's all. I'm going to stop here because, as I told you, my expertise is really not about it, but my curiosity was really raised through those biennale where you go and countries participate and you wonder what is behind the scene, who are the senior artists, who are the mid-career artists, who are on the forefront, and so on. With those biennales, of course, for those of you know, are expensive matters. And if it wasn't, I think, for the government subsidizing heavily those places, especially the venues they took were very apparent. You know, you just take any Vaporetto, you see them. And in many cases, it was 2 venues at the same time. You see that there was a big investment in contemporary art in the country. So the first speaker here, so that she gives us a bit of background, is Asmar Narimanbekova, who is an artist and a scholar. She studied in France, in Georgia, and in Azerbaijan, and speaks, of course, Russian, Azeri, and French and English. She exhibited also widely as an artist in Berlin, Venice, Vienna, France, and is an honorary artist in Azerbaijan itself. She will give her presentation. I ask each to have a presentation of 10 minutes, which she will say it in Russian, but Afsana is luckily translating it in English for us. Please, Asmar, please come here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, for all the guests. I'm sorry that today I cannot speak English very fast. For me, very simple speaking Russian, because I have only 10 minutes for the 10 minutes for the English, not for me. I'm sorry. Today we have, I'm sorry, I begin in English. Мы сегодня с вами встретились как бы по такой причине, как бы пойдет речь об азербайджанском искусстве, которое начало свое существование после слома традиционного и перехода к советскому периоду. Это был 1920 год.
Okay, today we will be talking about Azerbaijani art and its transition period from a very traditional period before 1920s towards the Soviet period that started in 1920.
Этот период характеризован и интересен, с одной стороны, еще и тем, что пропаганда была актуальна в тот период для нового государства. Начиналась новая эра советская, и тут происходила, необходимость была плаката, и он стал сильно развиваться.
Okay, so this was the period in the Soviet times, when the Soviet era started, and art became a propaganda tool. And here we will be showing you posters that were the propaganda tools of the Soviet government.
И вот конкретно характеризуется новый период вот тем плакатом, который существует сейчас на экране. Художник Азимзаде, он очень был интересным по своему мышлению, и его трактовка, она была в кубистическом стиле. Но идея была того, что алфавит арабский, он как бы запутывает ноги героя, и это характеризует то, что происходит регресс и остановка в развитии. И вот латинский алфавит, он как бы дает прогресс.
Okay, so this is one of the interesting artists of that period. This is Azimzadeh, one of the most important Azerbaijani artists of that time. And this is one of the propaganda tools that he produced. This is a propaganda poster that's showing two people chained, and the chains are Arabic letters. And this is showing that Arabic alphabet is taking us backwards, and we have to move to the Latin alphabet towards the progress. And this was part of the Soviet government's propaganda that he was adhering to.
Приходит к власти Сталин. Этот период наиболее драматичный не только для истории Азербайджана, в целом для всего советского пространства. В этот период начинает формироваться новое мышление, которое поддерживается правительством. Основная идеология была направлена на защиту и как бы восхваление ведущего класса, рабочих и крестьян. И новый стиль начинает называться соцартом, социалистическим искусством.
The next period in the Soviet art is the period of Stalinism. When Stalin came to power, a new art form emerged in Soviet Empire, and that was the socialist realism. Socialist realism was aimed at showing the lives of laborers and ordinary people, and was aimed at showing the bright future for those people under the Soviet regime.
Происходит слом и разделение правых и левых. Художники, которые были приверженцами европейского направления, а в тот период очень сильно развивался кубизм, футуризм, наиболее интересные были работы, выставлялись они в Европе, этих художников считали левыми, их в принципе не допускали к выставкам, и они были по большому счету в изгнании.
And this brought a breakdown of the art sector into two sides, the left side and the right side. And the left side were the artists that were creating works in modern European movements like Cubism, Futurism, and many others. But that meant that the government would not approve them. So the government started isolating them from the art sector.
На отборе и секции выставок присутствовали обязательно представители Центрального комитета, за которыми было основное право решения участия художника на выставке, да или нет.
And there were art commissions, which consisted of government officials who decided which works would go to the exhibitions and which works wouldn't.
Из истории нашей страны, Азербайджана в частности, мы сейчас приводим пример искусства художника Ашраф Мурада, который начинал как соцреалист после окончания Петербургской академии художеств, но с периодом того, когда он начал заниматься поиском, ища свое собственное «я» в искусстве, он стал трансформироваться и становиться художником достаточно современным. Но он был изгнанником, его не допускали к официальным выставкам, и он оставался в тени. Его судьба оказалась очень драматичной, он умер в полном одиночестве, и его работы были выкинуты на мусорную свалку. И после участия некоторых художников некоторые работы были до сегодняшнего дня они сохранились.
One of the artists of that period that decided to self-explore and not do socialist realism was Ashraf Murad, this artist. So Ashraf Murad, after his education, actually painted in socialist realism style, but then he abandoned it and he decided to search for himself. So he painted in this style, but that meant that government disapproved of him and he wasn't allowed to any of the exhibitions. He was completely isolated from the art community and the art sector and died tragically alone, and his works were dumped, and actually they were saved by his friends and by his neighbors from the rubbish bins around his house. And the works that we have today are the works that were saved by his friends.
Okay. Сейчас я вам хочу представить одну из первых женщин, художниц, Марал Рахманзаде, которая никаких проблем не имела с официальными структурами. Она выставлялась, была соцреалистом. Ее основная была тенденция изображать природу. И она успешно, в принципе, выставлялась. У нее не было проблем. Это относится к разделу социалистического искусства.
This is the piece by the first female artist of Azerbaijan, Maral Rahmanzadeh, and I want to stress here that she didn't have any problems with the government because she basically drew in more or less socialist realism style, and her art was more or less neutral, so she never had any issues with the government and was quite successful in the art community at the time.
Okay. Сейчас я вам хочу представить одного из очень интересных художников, Саттар Бахулзаде. Его судьба также складывалась, в принципе. Он был поначалу соцреалистическим художником, но после долгой борьбы с общественным мнением он себя полностью реализовал и стал настоящим художником своего собственного «я». Импрессионистом мы считали его, и он действительно оказался самым интересным художником в истории нашей постсоветского периода.
This is the artist called Sattar Bahlouzadeh. I wanted to point him out because he's one of the most important Azerbaijani artists of the time. He also started in socialist realism style, but then he abandoned it and he became an impressionist artist, and now he's one of the most revered artists of post-Soviet Azerbaijan as well.
Сейчас я хочу перейти к очень интересному образу художника Мирджавад Джавадов. Этот художник всегда считался абстракционистом, авангардистом. Он не соглашался с официальным мнением. Его путь был с самого начала избран им самостоятельно, и он так бы дожил до конца дней своих, он оставался именно авангардным, абстрактным художником. Его признал Запад. Он выставлялся во многих европейских странах, начиная уже даже в период Советского Союза. К сожалению, он не оказался в живых, но сейчас его искусство признано официально в Азербайджане. Он везде представляется как самый интересный художник периода Советского Союза, но он был непризнанным.
This is Javad Mirjavadov, one of the important artists of the Soviet era as well. From the beginning, he protested against the socialist realism, and he created his own abstract, avant-garde, expressionist style, and then continued to paint in this style until his death. He was never approved by the government in the Soviet times. He was quite accepted and very famous in Western Europe, even during the Soviet times, and only after the Soviet Union collapsed, then his works became quite prominent in Azerbaijan and accepted.
И сейчас я хочу вам представить художника Тогрула Нариманбекова. Как бы я являюсь его дочерью еще ко всему же. Он был художником, тоже пережившим очень много проблем в период официального правления, когда у его работы, в принципе, поначалу соцреалистические, они полностью не нравились правительству, считался он официально формалистом. Получив несколько неприятных пощечин, он полностью себя трансформировал и понял, что ему надо заниматься чисто национальным искусством.
This is Togrul Narimanbekov, one of the prominent Azerbaijani artists of the time as well. He also started in socialist realist style, but his style, even in socialist realism, wasn't accepted by the government. So he was kind of slapped by the government a few times, and after that he decided that he's abandoning that style completely and going back to a traditional Azerbaijani style of expressionist painting. Надо перейти уже на этот, как его,
На соцреалистов, да? А скульптуру не показать? Женскую,
Да,
да, касаясь скульптуры, как бы скульптор Эльмира Гусейнова, она также была очень интересна в своих интересах, и в период своего обучения в Российской академии художеств она очень была привержена майоле, любила бурделя. Это не приветствовалось официальными кругами, но она оставила за собой свое право любить искусство.
This is an Azerbaijani sculptor, Elmira Husseinova. She's interesting because she was very passionate about French school of sculpting, but when she was schooled in Soviet Union, her professors were always against it because her passion, according to them, was anti-Soviet, but she still adhered to her style until her death.
Представители чистого соцреализма – это художник Микаэль Абдуллаев.
Socialist realism, this is what it looks like.
В его картинах затем Таир Салахов, который является представителем социалистического искусства, он и сегодня тоже актуален. Его реализм называется северный реализм.
This is Tahir Salahov, he's still alive. This is socialist realism, and it's called cold northern realism, his style.
И, наконец, наступает период новый, new generation.
And then the independence comes, Soviet Union collapses.
После того, как заканчивается эпоха Советского Союза, появляется очень много интересных художников, у которых каждого существует свое лицо. Они многие себя стали проявлять совершенно свободно, потому что у них не было страха, что их могут контролировать за не нравящиеся темы. И поэтому появилось много интересных имен. Одно из имен – Гиюр Юнус, который продолжал каджарскую школу, но в современной интерпретации.
After the independence, a lot of new artists emerged who continued to explore and self-express, and they were free because there was no oppression from the government. They weren't asked to create in a specific style, and we're here going to show artists that found their own paths after the independence. This is Gayur Yunus, who went back to Qajar style of painting.
Yes. After Джамаль Рахманлы – это молодая художник, которая интересуется и любит миниатюру и трансформирует ее в современном стиле.
Okay, and this one was Jamal Rahmanlı. She paints in miniature style, does large paintings, but uses miniature thematics.
Затем Фаик Ахмед, который тоже занимается трансформацией форм ковра.
Faik Ahmed doing conceptual art using carpets.
Сабина Шихлинская, она является тоже колористическим абстракционистом.
Colorist, abstractionist, modern Azerbaijani artist as well.
Затем Мусеев Амиров, тоже очень интересный художник, который традиции продолжает с танковой живописью, но при этом современным языком.
He's also continuing traditional landscape Azerbaijani painting with modern themes as well. This is Musaib Amirov, and the last one.
Так, и, наконец, я вам представляю свое искусство, которое называется, как бы стиль мой называется неоэкспрессионизм.
This is a neo-expressionist style, and this is my painting. I want to end the presentation with this.
Да, тема любви, она как бы существует вечно, и поэтому я ее воспеваю.
Love is eternal, and that's why I wanted to end the presentation with this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Asmar, for giving us a background, because this is what was missing when we go to the biennales. We only see the most recent work. But I would like to invite for a bigger background on Central Asian art and mostly on Kazakhstan, Dr. Aliya de Tiesenhausen. She's a scholar and a curator and obtained her doctorate on philosophy and history of art. Her thesis was on Soviet Orientalism of the 1930s and 50s. And you're a curator with a special focus on Kazakhstan, and also you did TV programs with somebody I like very much, Valdemar Januzak, on that matter, and work with Christie's in the Department of Icons and Russian Art. So we're delighted to have you. I don't know if the talk, is that the title of the talk, Orientalist Dimension in Socialist Realism? No? Maybe not. Maybe it's one of, she's a wonderful publisher also. She published many books, has done many books and articles and essays. Thank you, Dr. Aliya.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me, Afsana. In fact, when Afsana, we spoke to her first time, and she said, I'm doing this event on Azerbaijan, and I said, well, I specialize in Central Asia, so it's going to be a bit difficult for me to contribute. But she convinced me that, first of all, Central Asia and Azerbaijan, they share common Turkic past, but also they share common Soviet past. Because what you've just seen of the Soviet period would have been very similar in Central Asia. In fact, the book which I mentioned, which Central Asia in Art, which I published in 2016, was exactly about that, about the depiction of Central Asia in Soviet times and the layering of socialist realist art, which was mostly propaganda art, with the depiction of another region, which is Central Asia and a form of Soviet Orientalism. However, I'm not going to talk about this today. We did an exhibition on Kazakh art at Woping Power Station last year. It was entitled Post-Nomadic Mind, and this also included Soviet works, but also contemporary works. And today I'm mostly going to concentrate on contemporary works. And the title post-nomadic suggests the relationship to the nomadic past and the post-nomadic periods. Of course, Soviet Union was a period when nomadism was eradicated, but today we'll also live in a post-nomadic period. And I'm looking at the artists who use in their artworks either refer or use traditional methods or tradition and history. And what I would like, I will go through the pictures and talk about them a little bit, but I will also like you to keep in mind these questions about what tradition is and who actually says that this is traditional or this is our history, and how the artists use it. And sometimes they use it to address the historic issues, but sometimes they use it just to talk about something, social problems that exist today. In fact, I will only show one Soviet period work, and the rest are going to be contemporary artworks made by artists from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. So this is Saida Tabekov Battle for a Square, which is an immersive video installation usually, where you see all these men. It's a traditional Central Asian game from Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, where men, predominantly on horses, they have to get a carcass of a sheep or a goat from each other. It's basically quite a masculine game, and of course it's also a reference for competition, which is well known all over the world. A competition maybe for food, but in Western societies it's for work or for a mate or for a school place for a child, and so the Tabekov uses this idea of a traditional game, but to talk about something quite contemporary, and also juxtaposing this sort of very down-to-earth situation with, a contemporary gallery and a video installation. The same game was addressed by Kanafia Tiljanov in the Soviet period, but he was the artist of they were called the artist of the 60s, because they departed from the strict socialist realist tradition, and they were the artists who first started to look at national identity. And at that time it was this idea of freedom, of rediscovering these traditions, and we can see that it's a very different Kokpar, it's something very heroic. And we see these men on horses continuing, but taking a different approach, a more official, more government-based approach. And we see across Central Asia in the 1990s, we see appearance of monuments. In this work by Yerbosin Miltibekov, he addresses a square, one sort of a place in Tashkent in Uzbekistan, which had a monument which over 100 years has changed every 5 years. So, there was a Tsarist monument, and there was early Soviet monument, and there was Stalin, then Marx. But at the moment, there is a man on a horse, I believe it's Amir Timur. And this men on horses appeared all across Central Asia, and of course they are linked to the idea of power. But this is also the idea of history as being very military history, the history of victories, masculine history, and the idea of strong leadership, which became very important for the creation of states in contemporary Central Asia. The contemporary artists sometimes use it in a more humorous way. In this work, Aliya de Tiesenhausen, a female artist, she creates wallpapers and cushions on which she prints these images, and one of these is this meat grinder, grinding these heroes on horses, and so some come in, some come out, and it's an endless creation of new heroes and the rediscoveries of some historical figures that nobody knew before. And at the same time, it's just the position of this male and female space, because obviously the meat grinder and the idea of kitchen is a very female space, while the man on a horse is a very male space. In a more sort of, in a more dramatic way, Nurbol Nur Ahmed, he uses sort of, maybe injured horse, but as a form of an ancestor and mixed with a female figure. So here, again, this questioning of sort of expected gender roles. And this is another sort of one of the biggest battleground of what is tradition and what is history, is the image of a female, or the place of a woman in Central Asian society. So Aliya Suleimanova, she makes this, she takes 19th century photographs of women in bridal dress, and she recreates it using plastic bags. So this way she addresses two questions. One is that the women in contemporary Central Asian society still continue to be, their main role is continued to be viewed as, to get married, to have a child, and to be in the home. And so she questions how, and in the discourse, in official discourse, it's considered to be, this is traditional, this is how Central Asian women wear, this is how they should be, and also, of course, Suleimanova brings the plastic bags, and so she draws a parallel between the use of land and the use of a woman, or abuse of the woman, abuse of land. However, what are Central Asian women? What is traditional Central Asian woman? We see in Saudat Ismailova's film, Kırk 40 Girls, she's an Uzbek filmmaker. So she makes this live performance using, female performance, and she talks about a Turkic legend about Gulayim, who was a teenage warrior who led a group of 40 girls, and she defended her lands. And this is, so this is not a new legend, it's a legend which existed for a long period of time. And so she brings it into film and into live performance to address, this is also a Central Asian woman. And of course there are other views. For example, Bahid Bubikyanova has a witch, and you have this sort of tradition of Central Asian women being healers and being medicine women and relating to nature. And Azza Shadanova, a young artist actually who was born in Kyrgyzstan, but she lives in Folkestone, and she makes this image of a woman linked to nature through this sheep fleece, because of course in Central Asia sheep is everything from food to clothing and to even traditional yurt housing, and she links this to a woman, because mostly women would have taken care of all of these things, but and having a plait, which is quite often you see in paintings, in Soviet paintings, a woman with a plait. But of course, a woman's hair is the idea of her femininity and fertility, but always plaited in a way that it's always sort of, she can't let her hair down, so she has to always keep strong. But it's interesting, the use of this traditional material, which is fleece. And other artists, for example, Gulnur Mukajanova, she lives in Germany now, she sort of molded this felt into these human masks and human faces. And as the title suggests, is this the transformation of traditional values during globalization. So in a way, she's mourning the loss of individual identities, that everything becomes the same. But at the same time, somehow, maybe she links it through her felt material to the traditional past, where on some level it remains inside us. Other artists like Almagul Mindlibayeva, she uses in her video works, she uses backgrounds of historical Central Asian buildings, but also obviously with all the fabric and the women being sort of entrapped in it. It's another questioning of a female position, because the monument is also to it's a mausoleum to a female historical figure. In a different take on history, Ashat Ahmedyarov, he makes these paintings of skulls, animal skulls. And again, it's related to some traditional beliefs related to animals, but also the word head is the same in English, but same in other languages. The head, it's the human head, but also it's the head of, a head of a family, it could be a head of a community, a head of state, and how there is in Central Asia this very strong reverence of anyone who is the head. And of course, Ahmedyarov here, I don't know if you can't see on this image, but he plays a little bit with the colors of the Russian flag, and also, there's a Georgian, I don't know what it's called, the Georgian band, which is quite often used for celebrations of Soviet military victories. And so this is the questioning of whether it's, this reverence of heads of anything is maybe, maybe already dead for contemporary society. But in a more humoristic way, the Kyrgyz artists Gulnara Kasmalieva and Muratbek Jumaliev, they make these photographs of tourist sites, and so there's also this questioning how real is this traditions are. Of course, they are real for some people, but we'll never, almost the outsider would never see that reality, but they see this simulated reality of a shepherd's life and some sort of romanticized vision of what the past was and how it was to occupy that past, not related to what's happening in the present. So that was a quick run-through all different issues that contemporary art in Central Asia raises today.
Thank you, Aliya. Thank you for giving us a background, especially also including lots of women artists, which very often is not in many exhibitions. I forgot to show that one also, that opened my curiosity. It was in Germany, actually, I discovered on Central Asian art. It was a catalog in 2004 that IFA had published. But it's true that we don't have enough exposure. From what I gather, sorry, before we go into any question, I would like to invite Afsana. Afsana, who invited me to moderate despite my little knowledge of Central Asian contemporary art. Afsana Tahirova, I met her only a few months ago, but she was extremely passionate about the exhibition she was preparing downstairs. I looked at the work and I said, you know, I have seen things that looked more contemporary in Venice. And she said, yes, but many people of our generation don't, many people who are known in Azerbaijan are absolutely unknown. And young curators only promote young ones or the ones that are trendy or accept curatorial direction. She was so passionate about her country and its heritage that really it excited me to collaborate on this project with her. And then when she was telling me her life story of how things change and her own education changed from one language to another, I think now you can, Afsana, you can come and illuminate us on what is the background of a young person, young curator or young artist in Azerbaijan.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yeah? Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming this evening. Today, after Asmar's presentation about what happened in the Soviet Union and how the identity was suppressed and how it revived, and after Aliya's presentation about what's happening in Central Asia currently, I wanted to take a different angle, an angle that has been neglected by the history books. It's an angle of my generation, of how we were on the crossroads of the Soviet Union and independence, and how we moved from one to the other, and how we survived in the chaos. And this is what I want to talk about today, because our identity had not formed fully when we moved to independence. So the elements that made up our lives in the Soviet Union were all of a sudden gone and were replaced with new things. And we didn't always know what those new things were. So I lived 6 years in the Soviet Union before independence, and a lot of the things are still quite vivid. Okay, I give a date, from 1985 to 1991. So 6 years, 6 full years, and some of the elements are quite vivid in my imagination still. I remember these publics. Do you remember these? Like anyone in the Soviet Union? So I remember queuing in the shops to get a lot of other things, but this is all I cared about. I remember the very communistic mosaic mural in the building, next to our building, showing laborers with flags and everything walking towards the better future, which was not such a better future in the Soviet Union anymore, but the mural was still there. I remember flying to Armenia to meet my dad's extended family, extended Azerbaijani family. So a lot of these elements would go forever and would never come back. So this is my first grade at school. I put this up because this is 1991. This is when Soviet Union had just collapsed. But at the top, we're still writing in Cyrillic. So when Asmar showed the poster about Arabic alphabet and changing Arabic to Latin, this happened in the 1920s. But when Stalin came, he changed the Latin alphabet to Cyrillic. So we were writing in Cyrillic at school. And as you can see from the blackboard and from the floors, the school is falling apart, like the Soviet Union itself was falling apart. So, and the map still says Azerbaijan, Soviet Socialist Republic at the back. So the educational things had not changed yet. But what happened in grade 2, our teacher walked in and said, kids, we have to learn a new alphabet. I think the alphabet will be changing. So which alphabet were we going to learn? She said, probably we'll change back to Latin. So we started learning Latin alphabet. And at home, my parents started teaching me Farsi alphabet because they said, you never know which alphabet we will change into. So just learn this one as well. And you can imagine this 6-year-old and the mess she was going through, learning different alphabets, everything changing, school changing, TV changed. This was quite interesting. When the Soviet Union collapsed, what was Channel 1, an extension of Channel 1, Channel 2, in Azerbaijani and Russian, became a lot of channels. And then Turkish channels emerged, and I realized that I understand this language. It's kind of Azerbaijani, but with a different accent. And then my parents told me because we are the same race. So that was a bit of a confusion in my head because everything was in Russian previously, and now it's Turkish and Azerbaijani, and I understand it. So it was a bit of a chaos. So to walk out of this chaos, families, society, education systems started feeding us our cultural identity, our pre-Soviet cultural identity, to cultivate who we are. So this I wanted to show because it's Book of Dede Korkut, and Azerbaijanis here and Central Asians here would know what it is. It's a Turkic dastan. What do you call it in English? Epos? Epic stories about the Turkic warriors from Central Asia. So we started reading this. And the reason why we started reading this at school and at home was because we had to understand that we are Turks. Because as my grandfather would say, they were not allowed to call themselves Turks in the Soviet Union. They were called Azerbaijanis, but not Azerbaijani Turks. They were called sometimes Tatars, but not Turks. So we started reading this, and this is epic. Like, I don't remember everything, but I remember the warrior woman, Çiçek, fighting and wrestling her own boyfriend from time to time. And yeah, if you think Game of Thrones is epic, well, until the last season anyways, you haven't read this. And then the school started cultivating our identity through not just pre-Soviet, but pre-Russian Empire poetry. So this was Fizuli. He is a 15th/16th century Azerbaijani poet who lived in the Safavid Empire and later in the Ottoman Empire. So we started memorizing and learning and exploring his ghazals. So art and literature became a way for us to understand who we are. Toğrul Narimanbekova, Asmar's father, was another prominent painter that was fed into us slowly. These are and he's very, very famous with his pomegranates and with Azerbaijani landscapes and Azerbaijani traditions. So we were given books by Toğrul Narimanbekova at school and at home. So all of this, like a puzzle, we started cultivating our cultural identity slowly. And this led me step by step to London. And in London, I started a gallery where I'm representing Azerbaijani art, but I'm choosing artists that are connected to their roots, that are fusing tradition with the modern. One of them, for example, is Vugar. He's very focused on Azerbaijani carpet-making tradition. So he uses carpet thematics and carpet-making patterns in his paintings. This one, for example, is a painting of a horse, but it's been inspired by Karabakh carpet. This one is also from that series, from his Resemblance series that was created 2 years ago. And another artist that we're representing has gone back to further, not tradition, but Azerbaijan has been a geography where old civilizations have lived. One of them is the rock carvings in Gobustan. This is civilizations that lived on average between 5,000, 20,000 years ago, and there's rock carvings in Gobustan showing their ritual dances, their battles, and one of my artists is using that theme, Gobustan, in his Gobustan series, like this one, for example. Another artist that we're representing, he was schooled in the Soviet Union, and he was almost failed for being different to everyone else. But his mentor, his professor, saved him from being expelled from the art school, Haji Mirza Ferzaliyev. And I wanted to put up this painting specifically because it brings together Zoroastrianism and Islam, the camel and the fire and the sleeping man and the angel. And these two in Soviet Union, you couldn't celebrate Ramadan. Novruz, the Zoroastrian New Year, wasn't specifically banned, but it was discouraged until the end of the 60s. Only in the 70s we started somehow celebrating it, but even then not like a Novruz holiday, more like a spring festival. And then finally, I wanted to show Emin, another artist that we're representing. His colors are very Azerbaijani, and the instrument, the national Nagara instrument, is being shown here. So this is what we're doing in London. In London, we're trying to bring Azerbaijani culture here, but fuse it with the modern. We're not doing purely traditional styles like miniature, for example. We're fusing the two. And before, so this is our, if you want to follow us, what we're doing. Before I end this presentation, I want to say that in 5 days' time, in 28th of May, it's 101st anniversary of Azerbaijan Democratic Republic. That was established in 1918 as we broke off from Russian Empire and Russian Revolution and created our own secular government, which only lasted for 2 years because Soviet army attacked later. But those 2 years were very important for us because we created our flag, our national anthem, our identity. We reinstated our identity disconnected from the Russian Empire. And when we reinstated our identity in the 90s, we went back to the elements that were developed by these guys, by the Azerbaijani democratic government. This is a photo from 1919. Azerbaijani newspapers, so Mehmed Emin Rasulzade, Azerbaijanis here would know him, is right there. So I wanted to end this talk with this, and happy Azerbaijan Democratic Republic Independence Day. So I wanted to dedicate my talk to them because they created the foundations that we went back to in the 1990s. That's it. Thank you. Is that right?
Thank you, Afsane. What I wondered, for me, what I could see through many of the works, many similarities with Iranian concerns. And of course, this is a country that was for centuries also had a very strong links with Iran, was considered a part of Iran also, since we considered even in Iran, our Azerbaijan section. I did exhibit Behruz Heshmat once, who was a Nazari artist here in London. What I wonder, for example, you mentioned you presenting the artists, because of the Biennale, of the very big publicity that the Yarat Contemporary Museum has in Azerbaijan, in Baku, how many galleries do exist, for example, in Baku?
How many galleries were there? 4 or 5, I guess? But not that many galleries like you have
More
in Iran.
than 5, more than
Like in Tehran, you
7,
have a
yes.
lot of galleries. In Tehran, you have an auction, you have fairs. In Azerbaijan,
But it's very recent, because
the
till
range
till
isn't
a
that
few years
diverse.
ago, we only had also 5 or 6 decent galleries.
So we are
Today
at
there
that
are
stage
300 galleries, yes, and a Tehran auction.
we're at that stage, and now there's a negotiation about starting an auction back in Azerbaijan for the local market. So we're moving.
And the museums, because now there is a foundation, there is the Yarat Museum who invited
There's Museum
Shirin
of
Nishat
Modern
to...
Art, there's Museum of National Art, there's Museum of Literature, there's Yarat Contemporary Foundation.
I see.
Yeah.
And Aliya, I also see many similarities in whether it's Kazakhstan. I also was hoping that you would mention, because there are a few people here who are from Uzbekistan who live there. Have you been to Uzbekistan and seen their art scene?
To Uzbekistan? Well, I have been, but not recently.
No.
Not
Yes,
recently.
but are there also galleries opening up in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan, or not so much yet?
There's been a lot of there's been a lot of changes recently. Well, in Uzbekistan, because of the political changes, but also in Kazakhstan, there's several contemporary. I mean, there have been an art scene since the 90s, and so they're probably, but it's not massive like here. So it may be 20 galleries. There are 20, 30 galleries which operate, but then the galleries which show contemporary art of the sort that I've shown today, there may be only 1 or 2, but they have been in the recent, I would say, in the recent maybe 5 years, the last 5 years, they're becoming very active. And in fact, the museum has organized this exhibition, which our exhibition was one of 4 exhibitions. So there was a whole program, and there were, yes. So there was, we had one in London.
This was in London.
This was in London, but at the same time, there were exhibition in Berlin of women artists, in Suwon in South Korea, and in New Jersey in the States. So there's been this activity, and there's been this wider acceptance, because in fact, you were showing the Azerbaijani Venice Biennale pavilions. Kazakhstan has never had a pavilion. Only it was part of the Central Asia pavilion.
Yes.
But those pavilions took place between 2005 and 2013.
Yes.
And since then, there haven't been a pavilion.
Sure.
So.
I know that Yes, we have time, yes, of course, for questions. If there is any questions in the public here, you can always interrupt me, because otherwise I want to ask more and more from Aliya and others. I see a lot of common symbols, whether it's the pomegranate that the Iranians, Afghans, all the artists from Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan use, from the hair, the use of hair, the issues of women as being the pillar of the society, and so on. We have lots of common link with Iran, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan, I think, symbolically. Yes, sorry.
To what extent?
I can't hear, sorry.
Sorry, this makes an awful sound. To what extent does the panel think that Central Asia has what is in effect a largely communal culture?
Communal.
You know, okay, so Azerbaijan has its traditions and its symbols and its history, but would you say that there is a common culture, and that this common culture, to a considerable extent, is very linked to Iran? That Iran has a central role in what may be in partly a common culture, or not? I mean, I think
In
I'd be
Central
very
Asia?
interested.
Yes, Aliya, you can answer.
In Central Asia. Well, Central Asia, yes, it has mainly two roots which are intermixed. There's Turkic roots and there are Persian roots. And the northern part of Central Asia, which includes Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, is mostly influenced by its Turkic roots, and then Uzbekistan and Tajikistan are more influenced, or somewhat more influenced by Persian roots. But there has been a lot of mixing. I mean, historically there was mixing, but obviously the Soviet period has also influenced the fact that there was a lot of exchange between the nations.
And the nomadic issue also, the fact that the
I think-
nomadic culture, you see a lot of horses. You showed the Buzkaji, but when you go to Afghanistan, you see lots of Buzkaji also, whether it's on films or in paintings or as
Yes,
an
they
entertainment.
discussed. I mean, the horse is
Yes.
of particular importance, not just in the Turkic parts, but also, as we've seen,
Yes.
for example, the man on a horse is in Tashkent, so in Uzbekistan.
Yes.
So yes.
And Asmar, do you want to answer that? What are the common parts, les choses en commun que la culture de l'Asie centrale a?
Centrale,
Les points communs.
c'est comment? Si par exemple, maintenant je pensais de...
You can answer in Russian. Afsana will translate.
Asya, İran, Azərbaycan necə bir-birindən bağlıdırlar sizcə? Azərbaycanca deyin, Rusça deyin, mən tərcümə edeyim.
Onu demək biraz çətindir, ona görə ki, sintez olub həmişə, ona görə ki, bizdə bir aləmdir, bir ценности те же самые, в принципе.
Because we were one, let me translate that, because it's hard to distinguish the countries now, because in the past we were all one empire and our values and our culture was the same. So today to look at it and distinctly at them is a bit difficult, because at the time we weren't distinct countries, we were all together in one empire.
But конечно, по культуре мы ближе к Ирану, так как мы были всегда в составе Ирана.
That's why culturally Azerbaijan is very close to Iran, because we were together.
The Persian.
Sorry, yes, the lady.
Thank you very much. I recently was in Uzbekistan apparently teaching museum professionals how to make their museums more entrepreneurial and more visited. And it actually follows on from your question. I feel very uncomfortable about the homogenization of culture and museums in general. So I saw the most amazing things in Uzbekistan. It was my first visit, and I was so struck by the museums, the art, the tapestry, everything was just wonderful. But it was kind of my job to try and encourage them to have late evenings and to introduce contemporary art into their traditional collections and have music, etc. And I just wondered, particularly Aliya, what your feeling is about this kind of obsession with cultural tourism, which means that all our museums have to be run in the same way, and kind of the museums were empty, I'm afraid. They really were, and it was such a pity because the people of Uzbekistan are at heart makers. They all make the most wonderful things. So I just wondered if you would like to respond, anybody, to that.
Well, personally, I think there should be more cultural, encouragement of cultural tourism, even internal tourism in Central Asia. Like you said, a lot of museums are empty, and there is not that much attention to art in general, but contemporary art in particular. So I think any way that there could be, for example, as I mentioned, there are a couple of galleries. For example, in Astana, there is DSC Gallery and the Aspan Gallery in Almaty, which are run by people who were trained here and who worked in the West, and of Kazakh origin, and they went back, and then they're introducing, they're doing, like you mentioned, they're doing talks, they're doing events, they're doing, they're inviting people to speak, they're organizing some sort of activity, and I think more and more people are getting interested, and I think, but these are private organizations. I think the problem with the museums is that because they're such a bureaucratic organizations, everything takes a long time to be processed, and I think it's a little bit is still run. I think it's different in Azerbaijan because there is more support from the quite high places, and I think in Kazakhstan there are not, the political elite is not so interested in art, which some people find good because that means they're not so involved with what's happening in contemporary art, and there's less censorship. But at the same time, it means there is no financial support, and there is, for example, as I mentioned, there hasn't been a Kazakh pavilion, and Central Asian pavilions, the ones which took place, they were organized by non-governmental institutions. There hasn't been an official, pavilion organized by ministries of culture or anything like that. And I think that would be, if there was a way to convince that because that's a form of, I don't know how do you explain it. That's a form of diplomacy, isn't it, as well? If these countries had invested in this.
Yes, Dr. Tiesenhausen, please. Can I have the microphone here to the first row?
Thank you very much to everyone on this panel. One senses, it shouts. Yeah. One senses that there is a tension, and I think all of you have to different degrees spoken about it. A tension between the desire to create a national identity in this post-Soviet era, from which, for instance, Turkmenistan or Tajikistan are dropped, or connections, historical connections, let's say, across the Caucasus are not at all taken into consideration, but that may very well be bound by what is tradition. How do we define tradition? You did, Aliya, sort of problematize it slightly, but I wonder if, for instance, you think that the understanding of tradition in Kazakhstan is a different kind of understanding of tradition than what happens, say, in Tashkent, or it happens in Baku. And if you can think about, what is this you're talking about?
Aliya, would you like to answer?
I think there are differences. There definitely are differences. But in terms of regional, because Azerbaijan, I think, stands in its own region. It's quite different from its neighbors, historically, religiously, etc. And Central Asia is more closely knit because there is that, religious connection as well. But but I think, for example, Uzbek culture is much more. There is much more sedentary. It was used to be much more sedentary culture, and there is much more existing pre-Soviet examples of art. I think, for example, in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, professional art was created in this period, which I'm describing in my book. Of course, another forms of art existed, but they were, more linked to applied arts. And in fact, Asia House had an exhibition of jewelry from Kazakhstan and textiles. So that was, this is something which is more associated, I would say, with Kazakh traditions. And of course, in my talk, I tried to put them all together, because there are now, because of the Soviet past, and because a lot of the artists working today, they were trained in the Soviet period, or at least they were born, like Afsana, they were born in the Soviet period. There is this sort of a similar desire to find this identity. I think that the similarity is in this, that we have to come out of this, decolonize, but decolonize from this Soviet period, but also as I'm mentioning, what we decolonize into. If we decolonize into something that is, maybe oppressing women, that is not exactly, the decolonization we want. So I think there are similarities in that, but of course each country has its own historical differences.
Just a moment, I want to continue this question, my answer. In Soviet period, every country had one school art. For example, Uzbekistan, it was different school. Azerbaijan too, Lithuania, Ukraine, all the countries had different schools, which every time represented on the United USSR exhibition in the every year. We had a big exposition in Moscow. It was very, very, very interesting situation for artists, because we can looking on the different schools, and for us it was very fantastically situation. I remember this time and think it's a pity we have not now in the same show, because for artists very important every year, every time show on the looking in other cultures. And now we have not.
If I may add one thing, when I went to Uzbekistan over 10 years ago or so, I took a driver and a translator from Russian to English. However, when I arrived to Samarkand or Bukhara, they all speak Persian. And this was just 10, 15 years after the dissolution of United. So I thought old people, young people, everybody spoke Persian. So I was translating to my driver what they are saying rather than the opposite way. So there are very strong, at least from the countries I know, in Uzbekistan there is a very strong link to Iran. And I think most of the monuments were restored by Iranians, actually. Yes, sorry, the lady here wants, Iraj, first Iraj Bagherzadeh, and then you, sorry. He did ask me before.
Thank you very much for a wonderful set of presentations. A question to Afsana here. We've spoken about the relationship with Iran, the closeness of the historical relationship with Iran. Is there anything resembling interaction between Azerbaijani artists and the Azeri-speaking Turkic Iranians of Tabriz and Mashhad and wherever else, Tehran, of course? Is there any interaction there? And secondly, politics is never far away from anything. And we know, of course, of the adversarial relationship that exists between Armenia and Azerbaijan for all sorts of different reasons, which we won't go into here. But is there any linkage on the artistic front with Armenian contemporary artists who are also, I mean, you know, there's quite a vibrant tradition of, or at least a vibrant activity of contemporary art in Armenia. Is there any linkage between Armenia and Azerbaijan on that score?
Between Armenia and Azerbaijan, there is no links. There is zero diplomatic, cultural, trade, anything, because it's off the table until the conflict is resolved. And there is a conflict, there is a territory that's occupied, negotiations have been going on, there's ceasefire, but sometimes fire still breaks out. So there can be no question of collaboration until that is resolved. And that's been taking for over 20 years now. But no, there is literally there's no flights to Armenia from Azerbaijan or back, or there's no cultural links. When it comes to Iran, currently it's happening slowly, because before Stalin came in, there was no hard border between Iranian Azerbaijan and Azerbaijan Republic. People were free to move up and down. And because we're speaking the same language and we're ethnically the same people, we were kind of together. My family partly comes from Tabriz, for example, but we lost connections when Stalin came in and there was a hard border. And
Oops, sorry.
So we lost that connection, but now we're recultivating it. We're recultivating, they're coming to Azerbaijan, we're going to Iran, to Tabriz, so it's happening now. And I think Asmar is doing an exhibition with Iranian, Azerbaijani, and Azerbaijani artists in Paris soon. So it's happening now, but with Armenia, no.
We have now a new connection, very different. Not this is the maybe for our history art. It's interesting too. I think
On
so.
the Iranian side, there is, because I was recently, not long time ago, a month ago in Iran, and there was the International Film Festival, and they had films from Kazakhstan, from Uzbekistan, so they were really opening up to Central Asia. At least in Iran, that opening is taking place. Sorry, the lady here now.
I'd like to reverse the proposition. As opposed to re-exploring your own national identities, I've just been talking to one of my students about how when the Soviet Union broke down, the problem for the artists was what was described by somebody as the imaginary West. They had this fantasy of the West and its expectations, which for them became a kind of oppressive tool of self-colonization. They constantly felt themselves provincial. Now, you began by talking about the Biennale. I've just been to the Azerbaijan, very, very huge advert, their pavilion, and you know, some of it was dreadful, and one particular piece was outstanding. But in terms of this stuff which doesn't quite hit the mark, and actually I preferred, if I may be very frank, the 2 years ago, before it was quite so chic, there was a lot of stuff which looked much, much more interesting, but was much less self-conscious. So obviously when there are these big government sums and this idea of creating a showcase, there is this problem of hitting the West, and also the problem for the artists of the imaginary West. In terms of this Soviet situation we were discussing, the artists then started to produce what they thought the imaginary West wanted them to produce, which is also linked to overdoing the kind of folk art element. So I wondered if I could throw that idea of the imaginary West into your discussion.
Yes, of course. This has happened with Iran quite a lot. You know, there was a demand for not only forbidden films or things that people were condemning Kiarostami, you cater for the West, because in Iran, but it was not well distributed. It doesn't mean. I think at the end, the quality will prevail. The filtering will come with time. The first, in 2013, when the first Azerbaijani pavilion was made, I think the curator was Hervé Mikhailov, a French curator who worked for AFA, for the Association Française for Art, and he helped. I mean, that's why they were more linked to their you have to be different, and the only way to be different is to be original and be yourself. So I guess that the Western can help, I think, to avoid the derivative works and repeating the same thing. But also it can impose to be very trendy, desperately seeking to be trendy, which is, look like everybody else. I call it modern academism. There are lots of people who are still in Duchamp's time, reproducing what Duchamp created 100 years ago. But this is everywhere, whether it's in Central Asia. When money comes, I'm not against it, because it was also thanks to Farah Diba, Farah Pahlavi, who in the 60s and 70s invested in Iranian art, and Iranian art flourished. And the moment the investment was finished, and French galleries wanted to have Iranian artists, and I'm sure the moment there is money into art and people are investing in their own culture, then the Western galleries want to have them, then there will be other things, and the filtering will come with time. It's just the beginning, I think, of that dialogue.
I actually think you're absolutely right. There is a belated arrival, if you will, and that it will take its time, but definitely will take also its own course. That is very clear. Coming out of the Soviet era, only about, what is it, 20-some years ago, is belated.
Yes. Sorry.
Rose, can I say something
yes,
on that?
You want to?
Just 2 seconds on the. Okay, just a little bit on post-Soviet people feeling provincial when looking up to the West. It is not true for my generation, because we never had the imaginary West idea. We formed our identity disconnected from imaginary West, because West was in front of our eyes already. And it's especially untrue for the generation after me, because they freely traveled all over and lived all over the world. So that is not on the agenda for the young people anymore. Maybe for older generation it was, I don't know. But for us,
sorry, the question there, yes, please.
Thank you very much for this beautiful talk, presenting remarkable art from this area. And being an artist myself from Kazakhstan, and I also lived in 2004, 2005 in Azerbaijan and Baku as well, so it's quite interesting for me. So thinking about this conflict ongoing conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, I'm just thinking in general that I understand that this talk and this presentation is more in relation of post-Soviet revival in relation to revival of ancient roots, but could you comment on how liberated now contemporary artists in Kazakhstan or in Central Asia or in Azerbaijan, because as you mentioned, during Soviet time, right, it was highly censored by government officials, and both political regimes in the area still kind of remains totalitarian. So the freedom of speech is still suffering, or just a simple example of taking any pieces of art out of the country is problematic. I back in 2005, I couldn't, moving from Baku back to Kazakhstan, I couldn't even move my son's children's drawings, because they were made by paint and acrylic, or not acrylic, even watercolor.
Where are you based, in London? As a Kazakh artist?
Guildford, basically
Guildford,
London,
okay.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So if
any
you could comment on that, thanks.
I think, as you know, how to present 3 presentations in 10 minutes is very introductory. in some ways, it's, you know, how can we talk about Central Asia, or even in one country, in 10 minutes or 1 hour? However, it was just the reason for this gathering was mainly to get also responses and see everybody's experience and information, because I'm sure there is lots of information available that we're not getting yet, but will be with all the exhibition. Hopefully, if you want to be on the mailing list or of Aliya's exhibition or Asmar or others, please do put your name down somewhere so that we can all communicate and share this knowledge. I would be interested, yes, to know that. Do you want to comment?
Yes, I'm a bit confused about not being able to take art out of Azerbaijan, because you cannot take art that's part of the national heritage that has been made in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and certain artists have been identified by the Ministry of Culture as national heritage of the country, so you can't take them out without the permission. All the other works that are made by artists, not by children, but by artists, you have to take them through customs and fill in documentation to say that these are not part of the national heritage, and you just take them out. So I don't know why you had issues taking children's paintings out, but art is not censored, it's not suppressed, it's not, artists are not pressured right now, and they can create in whatever style they want. They can work wherever they want. If they don't want to work in Azerbaijan, they can take residences up in other galleries. So there is no oppression of art in Azerbaijan right now. So, okay. Yes. We can talk about it.
Yes. So.
Conversation, maybe.
Yes, indeed. I think there are a lot of discussions that need to happen collaterally to this one, but we just don't have enough time. But of course, you're all welcome to join us in the room next door for a drink, I think there's some food there as well. And please do go downstairs to the gallery and see firsthand this art that has been discussed here. I think it's very important that we start getting engaged with these new forms of art that if you're unfamiliar with it, it's a great point, an opportunity to do it today. Thank you so much, Afsana, Asmar, Aliya, Rose. We're truly privileged.